Hi, everyone. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I think we've got a great crowd this afternoon to talk about AI, so really, really excited to get started. I'm going to hold off a little bit to give people time to join. While people are joining, I'll just say a couple of wee things, just sort of where the fire escape is and that kind of thing. I'd very much like to invite everybody to post questions and comments during the course of the conversation. So there's a chat function at the side and there's questions as well. Maybe just use the chat function because it's easier. People can just chat as we go. And I think that's maybe a nicer thing. You see, I've put a little message in there already. So, please join in. And what we'll try and do is answer questions as we go. So I will interject if I can to get the questions that you've asked answered as we go. I can see people typing. That's just brilliant. I know that everybody is going to want to hear some things that they can take away. So I want to don't hold back in terms of asking, because if there's no better group of people to have with you than these lot. There's going to be a lot of great things coming out this afternoon. I want to make sure that it's of value. So thank you, everyone. We've got a good number of people. Oh, I want to wait till 100. That would be great. Come on. One of our biggest talks so far, Pragmatic approach to AI. So just to sort of introduce, we felt it was important to cover this topic really, because we've been keeping an eye on AI for a while, as a kind of research thing rather than a kind of real world activity piece. And in the last year, we're just sort of looking at it as an interesting topic, to Gen AI being something that is kind of almost going to touch every part of our lives, but we don't quite know how. And I notice more and more people that I speak to use ChatGPT kind of on the sly. They don't tell anybody, just use it and pretend that they've done the work, which I think is an interesting thing that we're seeing, that it's sort of clandestine AI and maybe a different topic, but there we go. So I wanted to start by sharing a little story, because I think it's really interesting to think about how fast. My first experience with this was 6 months ago. I got diagnosed by my doctor as having high blood pressure. And it was horrible, because I thought, I'm going to have a heart attack, stressful life, etc., too much wine. And, I didn't know what to do, basically. And so I started thinking, right, I'm going to try and transform my diet and do more exercise. And I just didn't know where to start. And I started looking for diet apps or on websites for new eating plans and so on. And I went through probably dozens of sites that, those sites where you fill in a form, like 5 stages, and then it says, oh, we'll email you the details in, whatever. And then when they email you details, you have to pay to get the answers and so on. And I went through this a few times and I was just like, I can't deal with this. I'm in a sort of crisis situation, and all I get is this awful dark patterns marketing. So I have downloaded this app called Pi, which is made by Inflection AI, and it's quite a well-known one. And I thought, I wonder what I can do. So I've got this app, and you can talk to it. So I've got it connected to my car. So I'm driving home from work one day, and I was sort of desperate, and I was saying to it, what do I do here? Like, I don't know how to create a new meal plan. And it was an amazing moment, because it sort of said, don't worry, we'll sort it. Let's work through this step by step and design you a meal plan. Let's start by you telling me what kind of foods you like and what you don't like, and then I'll create something. And for the next 2 hours, I chatted. I sat in the car when I got home, chatted to this AI bot, got my whole meal plan sorted. And by the end of it, I was so moved by the support that this bot had given me. I was actually in tears. It was so transformative that I was able to just chat and get answers and get support from a non-judgmental source. And I know that sounds like that movie Her from 2013, But it was my first moment that was like that. And it was my first moment where I realized this is not just a tool. This is something that is going to change the way that we interact with, if you like, all of the services that we use now. It's not a replacement for, one platform. It's not a new social media, for example. It's a new interaction model for all of digital. And so for me, that's really, really fascinating. And, we're moving so fast. We're in 2015, so just a couple of years after that Her movie came out, you could see that AI was registering at about human-like levels in terms of handwriting recognition and speech recognition and reading. But just 8 years on, so where we are now, it's at or above human level in terms of language, school maths, coding, and, well, common sense is one of the things I read in Time magazine, which I thought was an interesting one because it surpassed my level of common sense a long time ago. And recently, ChatGPT famously outperformed medical students in a university level examination by 118%, so 20% over what students had achieved. So in a very short time, we are witnessing, if you like, this new way of interacting with digital that is so fundamental and so powerful that I can sit in my car and it can actually change my life. But we're not actually using it in business. And what I'm hoping that we can do today is change the way we're looking at it as a curiosity or a clandestine thing that we use, but we don't tell anybody about because we don't want it to ruin our chances of promotion, into something that is an enabler and a competitive advantage, right? Because somebody is going to do that. In our sector, in Equator, obviously we're a digital transformation consultancy. I'm very aware that it's a matter of time before somebody else comes along and creates a new offering, a disruptive offering for what I do that kind of takes over a lot of what we do. So we need to be on it and we need to be thinking about how we're using it. So we've gathered today this awesome panel, and I'm so delighted to have them with us. It's really an honor for me. It's really exciting to get the chance to talk to them, and I hope you guys get the chance to pose your questions as well. I'll let them introduce myself, but suffice to say, very, very excited about today. So we've got the panel come from all across the digital landscape, and I'm going to go around. Don't worry, I'll point you out so we know who to go to next. Go around the table and just let them introduce themselves. And what I've asked them to do is to give us a little insight into how they're seeing AI getting used in the real world today and in an accessible way. So I will go to Alex first because you're first on my screen.
Perfect. Hi. Thank you for having me on the panel today. My name is Alex Jules. I am a digital transformation leader at Google. I'm responsible for driving a lot of the executive engagements where AI is really at the core and center of the conversations. People really are trying to figure out, what does this actually mean? My career started in the lab environment many years ago, AI research, and then managing teams across sales and delivery, as well in technology, media, and telecommunications, right? All driving transformation. So it's actually very interesting to see where we are today, where, again, 30 years ago in research, looking at what does the future mean in terms of AI to actually seeing what it's actually emerging. And it is a fairly exciting time, especially with I don't want to say the advent of generative AI, but the emergence of generative AI in common in common parlance. It's here. It is becoming more accessible. The reality is we're seeing a lot of people that are, as we talk about what the future of work is, their habits are changing, what they're doing, how they're working is being shaped with generative AI. So it's really that part is really exciting, especially given that more traditional AI has taken significantly more, testing and hypothesis testing, et cetera, and has almost been relegated to those that could afford the data science, the programmers, et cetera, to actually help create competitive advantages. So looking at generative AI as a form of lowering the barrier to entries for many of the SMEs, smaller and medium enterprises is really exciting because I think there's a lot of conversation around innovation that is happening there. But I also think that we're seeing AI in places, and I think um, the general population is beginning to have an interesting conversation around where is it already, right? I mean, if you're using TikTok or any other kind of media entertainment device, it's there. It's been at the heart of it for many, many years. Where else do you see it? It's offered a lot of conversations around where it is, data, privacy, security, and of course the existential crisis that everyone likes to put on the table, which is what does it mean to me, my future, job, society, and the broad economic impact.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I like the fact that actually that's one thing we should come back to. AI isn't going to disrupt your industry. It already has. Is it something you want to talk about? Alistair, let's go to you next.
Yeah, so I'm Alistair Brown from AI Upskill, and we've been involved with training and coaching mainly SMEs over the last sort of 2.5 years. But more recently, sort of on the back of generative AI, we have been brought more into prototyping and people experimenting, which we're finding, quite fascinating. And we were quite surprised a good sort of year, 18 months ago, around the relatively slow uptake of educating workforces around AI. We found that quite surprising. And what you're saying initially, Jamie, about how ChatGPT and AI tools were sort of clandestine or kept quiet, and people were using them, but they didn't want to sort of acknowledge it. That has changed quite significantly, and we've seen, particularly over the last couple of months, and even over the last 3 weeks after that OpenAI Dev Day, really quite a change in what managers and decision makers want and feel they need to do, but also the ability of standard, ordinary, non-technical workers being able to contribute. So we sort of see this as quite a pivotal moment, to be frank. And even over the last couple of weeks, we've started to see SMEs, really quite small companies, some with quite limited budgets, get everybody involved with creating their own custom GPT, and even sort of moving that along to creating their own actions or custom functions. So relatively no code, virtually all no code. So we see that as being really quite dramatic. And the conversations we have in organisations, you're now seeing everybody start to contribute, and we see that as a tremendously good thing. And it's also quite it's a little bit like a therapy session, to be honest. People are now admitting, I have been using it. I've been 12 hours a day, sort of thing. And they're coming out and saying, yes, I've got this idea. They hadn't really had anywhere to sort of voice it, or they didn't know what the strategy was. So we're seeing a bit of that, but it's also a sort of a coming together where people realise that everybody throughout the organisation can and should be contributing that conversation. And there is a bit more of a merging between the old sort of data science, machine learning teams and workers. And I think this is even more important for the other point that Alex raised in terms of society and jobs and what's happening as well, because that's an extremely important conversation, and then the political discussion around that as well. So, I think it's been a good couple of months, and the pace of change is accelerating. More and more people are getting involved. But from what we're seeing at AI Upskill, the way people come at it has changed quite a bit in the last couple of months.
Brilliant. I'm glad that people are coming out of the woodwork. It's good. Stephen, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for the opportunity to be part of the panel. Stephen Koya, I'm the Joint Managing Director at an organisation called VKY. I definitely use ChatGPT to do most of my job. The other joint MD is the one that does all the work. In terms of VKY as an organisation, we focus on supporting clients with tactical implementation of AI and automation solutions. So often, they've already made the decision to use Google, for example, and we'll support them with actually putting that into practice internally. I think really interesting listening to Alistair and Alex, actually, because I think a lot of it resonates with, it's been such a change over the last 12 months, and I don't think anyone's quite got a distinct model of how to start. I think we're really seeing that across different organizations emerging from different functions in different ways. But I do think that everyone is the level of interest massive, and everyone's looking for that kind of practical way to get started. I think really interestingly, actually, in terms of actually real life examples where we're seeing a lot of use cases, it's really changing parts of organizations that have been the same for decades and actually challenging those models. So specifically, a lot around sort of front office customer care functions. So whether it's looking at good old or boring old, depending how you look at it, email as a channel and how you support customers, or looking at the actual contact center and how you're handling calls. I think it's just creating so many really interesting use cases about how you can actually make it a much better experience for your customer. Don't forget, a great experience for your employee.
Yeah.
But at the same time, looking to drive some of those efficiencies.
I think that, completely, Stephen. I think isn't it interesting how there's one way of using the generative AI tools that actually removes human connection. And there's another way that actually enlivens human connection. And I think if we're lazy about it, we end up disconnecting ourselves from others. And if we do it well, we have a potential to bring people together a little bit more, I think.
Absolutely.
So it's just how we do it. Right, so let's get started. Thank you very much for joining us. Amazing, really excited. The first thing I want to do is, as Alex has started off by saying, AI has been around for a long time. We've known about AI in terms of machine learning type activities around data analysis and that kind of thing for quite some time. And we know that the algorithms that fuel Google and fuel social networks and all that are quite advanced. I think it's interesting, it'd be useful, and now we're sort of starting to say AI when we really mean Gen AI. I think it'd be really useful to just frame a little bit what we're talking about. What are the bounds of what we're talking about, and what's the kind of subset of the overall, world of AI that really is applicable to businesses? What are we actually talking about for use in organizations? And maybe a little bit of a guide. We talk about ChatGPT as the sort of de facto, but obviously there's Bard and Claude and Midjourney and many others that are starting to kind of come to the fore. So there might be some tools that people don't know about that would be really useful to know about, and we're going to bring into the conversation as we talk about specific use cases and specific ways of implementing things. I don't know, Alistair, do you want to kind of kick off on that one and just frame it?
So I guess what AI and business now encapsulates is any process. It's any function. It's anything to do with your business. And if you think about the way startups are looking at it, then they'll be using AI right at the beginning. So it sort of comes back to what's at the heart of your business in terms of your data, your uniqueness, and then there's everything else that you happen to be doing now that could either be replicated or enhanced with AI. So it's really quite ubiquitous, and the use cases for us, it'll often start with something to do with marketing. Finance might sort of chip in with something, but it'll be sales, marketing predominantly. But then even at sort of board level, it'll be strategy and ideation as well. So gosh, to say what the context is within business, I think we really need to say almost everything in terms of generative AI. So creating content, of course, but also I would say even using code assistance, and we're seeing an awful lot of that, and I sort of encapture that as being the creative side, generative side of AI as well, and we're seeing that as a major drive in efficiencies, absolutely. So programmers using Copilot to either get them out of a spot or enhance or reflect, almost to be like a parallel coder with them. So I'd include that. In terms of, sort of systems and what people should use, so again, I suppose it sort of depends on whether you're looking at the prototype or the, enterprise production level. And there's probably others that would talk to sort of much larger implementations, but we always encourage small experimentation. So a lot of people use Claude over the summer on the side or as a backup to ChatGPT. And then I'd mentioned earlier that now after Dev Day, where we've got custom GPTs, that's a very good way to start modeling a use case, start using actions as well. There's no code. So that's the way you can start to sort of flush out a function and also get people used to the way an LLM, a large language model, is thinking in the background and potentially breaking that down into some subcomponents. So that's what you can do with actions. So that's something that's very useful at the design prototype level.
Talking in terms of doing, digital service production, design and production, the coding for that is something that you can start to use that as let's say, right, like just to be at your side.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and maybe this was less secretive than a lot of other functions when Copilot came along, or at least within GitHub. Then there was more pressure on data science teams to use this technology and to prove that they understood it, as opposed to certain other roles where maybe they still felt a little bit threatened by meant to be humanly creative, etc. So they were hiding back or, not admitting to using some tools. But I think we're all being sort of, flushed out into the open now.
No, for sure. I mean, I recently used ChatGPT to write a trading algorithm in Python High, can't remember. And I've never found a more efficient way to lose money in my life. It's amazing. It didn't really work. It wasn't really the golden goose, sadly. But I can see that there's the access to quite advanced coding for the regular person in the street is opened up, right? You can create things that you weren't necessarily able to before. Yeah,
and that's a good example where, if you are hoping for too much out of it or for it to be genius, then you are going to probably be in trouble. But certainly use it as a second opinion or as a first stab at a use case. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm kind of aware as well, like talking about the actual platforms. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of noise in the marketplace. If you go on, I don't know how aware the audience is of things called like Hugging Face, where you can go on and actually try, in development services. But it seems to me that there are a few key ones that really are worthwhile getting your head around. And there are a few, and there's one of the questions in the chat at the moment around IP and trademarking. And so there are starting to become ones. I know that I think it's Bard and GPT have said that they will indemnify people against any trademarking issues based on the content that it using the content that it creates. So there are moves to sort of give a sense of security in business. But I feel like there are certain players in the market that are kind of ones that look like they're going to be here for a while and you can kind of rely on, and then some that are a bit more about the hype. Alex, could you give us a little rundown on what the marketplace looks like to you? Who are the ones to watch and who are the ones that maybe it's a little bit like?
Instead of talking about names, there are values and qualities, I think, that are really important when making a decision. And organizationally, I like to ensure that whether it's a small business, Fortune 100, or irrelevant, is the values line up. And so I like to focus on safety first in some form or fashion. Sometimes it's data safety and security, and then what you can do in terms of data sets, right? So when we start looking at securing your own corpus, I think it's really important that you figure out what the data governance strategy you're going to use. And so some vendors, some providers like Google actually provide adapters, ways, and products, like Vertex AI, et cetera, to build your own data sets, your own models, really create the guidelines, guardrails around them, so that there's not really a bunch of leakage. No one, including Google, can use your data as well. You can create custom models, you can create adapters. And again, fairly low intensity in terms of you know uh, doing the coding yourself, right? Vertex is fairly simple to use if you get your head around it. So we're seeing a lot of business analysts use them more so than data scientists, which is of course a great impact to businesses because data scientists are a little bit more expensive than business analysts, et cetera, right? Being able to use SQL versus the entire toolkit comes with a different labor kind of barrier as well. But also, I go back just a few years ago when Google released AutoML for BQ, which was automated BQ, automated machine learning on BQ, which was really an interesting advance, especially me coming into the company and seeing that, because now you were able to do some really interesting inferencing and extraction, again with low code, no code. Again, when I work with startups and SMEs, those are invaluable tools in terms of, hey, I don't have the talent to do this. I can maybe spend a weekend or so, but I can't spend the next 2 years learning, because by the time that's done, the technology has changed or the market has shifted for me, and I just don't have access to the talent pool. So it's really interesting to see what the big shift is there. So to answer the question again, it's really going to be about security, looking at the consumer values. Whether or not they're properly funded is also a really good one, right? We're seeing a lot, at least in the States, we're seeing a lot of blips on the unicorn map, right? Companies are saying, oh, wow, they're going to be great. They're going to be around for a couple of years, and within a matter of months, they're gone. And this is after several million in funding, et cetera. So trying to figure out the ones that are actually truly transformative as well are also really big. And I like to go back to the ideas around whether or not it is truly transformative to you and your business, right? And the first one being, is it going to impact the user journey, or is it going to impact the bottom line, right? Or better yet, the profit equation. If it's going to change the user journey, we know what those can be, because we're humans, we process things in certain ways. So the modalities are interesting and important. So visual modality, being able to have a conversation with it, et cetera. So again, call centers have been using some form of AI for a minute now, but conversational AI is still advancing, right? And it's really unique to see how much we're actually able to derive in terms of intent, et cetera, to the point where some of our customers say, that sounds a little too human. Can we introduce a little bit more of the robotic sound, because we want our customers to know this is not a human. Don't scream at my machine, please. It'll understand you, but please don't scream. It's not going to respond the way you'd like. So if you want to talk to a human, we can get you to a human. However, do something a little bit different, versus being able to do vision, input analysis, et cetera, versus, and this is the big question that many of the C-level executives are asking, how does it impact my business model, right? That's actually very transformative as well.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think, the sort of idea of actually, there's a large amount of it's just about asking the question, like, can I transform this process, this customer interaction? And in many ways, there is something out there that allows you to do that at the moment. Obviously, one of the early parts of implementing AI in business was data analytics. We've been talking to companies for 10 years now around moving to a data-driven, agile, approach, where you're acting not on intuition, you're acting on solid data, right? And I think this is fundamental, and I don't think that a lot of companies, or not enough companies, are doing it, because they creating the platform that allows you to innovate faster than the competition is really all there is in this marketplace, which is growing and changing so fast. But right now, I think a lot of people would struggle to understand how to really deploy data analysis into a business, and have it deliver value and have it deliver intelligent insights into the processes that they're running and the interactions they're running with customers and so on. So that might, on some extent, feel like it's been around for a while. To another extent, it might be that it's actually a bit tricky to kind of get your head around how to implement it. And maybe a really good way to start, because actually having those platforms there is a good thing to build on. Stephen, do you have any thoughts around how one understands how to identify where to use data in your business to deliver efficiency and value?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I liked Alex's point around using conversational AI in contact centers. We're seeing a lot of people looking at that, and I think, to come back to the question around data, I would almost go a step back and say it should be almost like chicken before egg. It's what comes first. It's looking back at that customer journey level, in my opinion, mapping out that process and looking at those specific steps. And then that's going to be where you make decisions around how and where you use AI. Yeah. So, great example, touching on Alex's point in conversational AI, we're seeing a lot of organizations actually recognizing that, understandably, especially financial services, are nervous about using AI to actually provide any kind of advice back to a customer, regulated environment. But actually, it makes a lot of sense to use the tech to do things like pass security, go through ID and V, as we would call it, or actually just on a basic level understand the reason for the customer's call, rather than have a very unhuman IVR, press 1 for, press 2 for. You can use natural language processing to actually identify that.
Yeah. I
think then the data itself, you actually split that journey up, and if you imagine each step in the journey becomes a distinct data point, right, you can start to drive the data out of those specific interactions and points. So actually, what was, dare I say it, considered sort of operations in the past, actually you can start to look at how customers' behavior is reacting to different treatments or in conversational AI at that level, and suddenly that becomes of interest to marketing departments. So I think it's about looking at how you actually start by breaking down those journeys into steps, how you have those distinct data points, how you then extract data from each point, and then look through it through those different lenses. So yeah, there'll be a lens that will drive customer engagement and make help make decisions about that in future, but also look at it through a lens of, well, actually, how can we make this more efficient whilst making it a better experience for the customer? It's not all about as you said earlier, Jamie, it's not about trying to make quick cost cuts and actually end up with more customer demand. It's about how you use that data intelligently.
Absolutely. No, I think it's, well, identify. I feel like it's easy to sort of say, oh, we need to measure this and measure that, but to actually drive efficiency is quite a tricky thing to understand. We do it in digital platforms all the time. It's because they're very, very easy to track, but more complex interactions and human interactions are much more difficult to benchmark and measure and enhance. But I think measuring at the beginning by finding those data points and starting to create measurement models is really, really important there. Because otherwise you're trying to do everything, but actually doing it like piece by piece, I think seems like a great way. Yeah, absolutely. So that's brilliant. So then what we can do is we can start, we take our business and we can start to kind of measure the various aspects of it and see where there are opportunities to enhance things. And I would hope that businesses are already doing that and are taking that on and realizing that if they're not doing it, somebody else is going to be doing it. The new generation of tools is with the large language models and transformer models. I think it's a really be interesting thing to just sort of dive into for a minute, because building on your data platforms, really what you're going to want to do is speed things up, scale things, reduce risk, so on and so forth. And these transformer models allow you to do that very, very easily in the right places. But interestingly, I think when you have a generic disruption, like I say, generic disruption, but like this, and what I mean by that is it's a disruption that comes almost equally to kind of all activities, if you like, as opposed to, let's say, Photoshop, right? So Photoshop comes out, everybody knows it's about editing photos. If I want to edit a photo, that's what I do. Whereas we're talking about a piece of technology that kind of can do a lot of things. We don't really know how to ask the right questions of it yet, I think. And I'd be really interested, Alistair, if you could give us, like, one thing I hear so much more than I ever used to is the use cases, right? People talk about use cases. And I kind of wonder, like, as an individual in a business with processes, how do I match use cases? What are use cases? How do I match them with the technology? And how do I find ones that actually can be enhanced using this technology?
Yeah, and as you look, are you finding something that you weren't expecting? An example that sort of comes to mind is we were working with a recruitment consultancy who were after a more efficient way to match CVs and job specifications, and a large language model with relatively little curation and fine tuning actually did quite a brilliant job, and it actually created a number of new metrics around what you should be looking for. And it came up with all of these bisociations and adjacencies. So it's looking at, in the depths of somebody's CV, and then in the depths of a client's offering. So these were things that weren't directly in the skills matching the job spec. It comes up with these things. So that then takes the company into a new realm about selling additional services and additional consulting, and even trying to market the candidate in a different way. So there is trying to use the technology for known use cases, and then there's experimenting and finding all of these new ones, and then sort of having a step back and saying, well, were we actually ever running our business in the most optimal way? And the answer in that situation was no. You were absolutely missing some huge tricks, and we weren't specifically looking for that. But when you use an intelligent model and you free it up enough in the experimental phase to be a little bit creative, it will come up with some very good suggestions. And there's a whole new raft of data points they've got now, and measurements and metrics, etc. But it was a spanner in the works for how they deal with companies and what sort of end-to-end process they're going to do. So that's maybe I haven't exactly answered your question, because that sort of turns it around, and there isn't an exact way of doing it anymore. I think you can't just sort of sit back and say, oh, these are our use cases, how could AI help? You've got to be open-minded, I think, to say it could fundamentally change how we operate in small and even large types of processes. It can rip through your organization with suggestions quite quickly.
I think that's a really, really good point. One of the weird I have this inertia with every new technology. Like, there's a little bit of like, oh God, am I too old to like get involved in a new thing? That kind of thing. And one of the things that I found really interesting is the inertia, but also the opportunity around just like being like, I wonder if it could do that. I wonder if, the AI system, whatever it is that we're using, could do that. And the way to find out is just to try it, because I think it's such an early phase, but such a powerful platform or type of product, it's able to say, oh yes, I can do that, or no, I can't do that. And I think that just sort of opening up the opportunity to say, here's my data points, or here's the things that I'm trying to solve. Is there something I could do to solve them? That I just have almost opening up the conversation with the conversational AI is a really good starting point.
But you sometimes have to advise senior management that you actually need guardrails on your human workforce. Then otherwise, you're going to end up with a whole team of philosophers and dreamers and ideation experts, and you've suddenly sort of lost what your core business was. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you can certainly be taken off the rails.
So do you think that businesses should be thinking about setting some standards or some rules around how they use this technology?
Well, not so much. I think you just need to put it in perspective and know when you're brainstorming and when you're actually driving efficiencies. And you probably need to be quite clear about that. And you need to have very clear milestones about where the return on investment or the return on time, or where that idea was either a flyer or a bit of a dud. And you need to be very quick to market on those, meaning internally you need to be very quick. So you have to have a new set of, rigors within your organization, I think.
Yeah, brilliant.
And again, I'm more sort of talking with sort of SMEs and even a couple of startups where they're meant to be imaginative, and that's all fine. But you can, it's a double-edged sword about bringing everybody into this conversation. You're going to get some fantastic suggestions and ideas, but you're also going to have your business pulled in certain directions you might not have been expecting. You don't want to kill that off, but there's a time and a place, and there's a manner. Keep engaged, but
absolutely. So I'm curious to know, and I think there's a few people asking as well, because it's and preempting my next question, which is well, okay, all good, but let's hear some examples. Like how are these things being used right now in businesses? And I'm thinking both in terms of the Gen AI thing, but also the customer experience piece, right? So in customer experience, we're seeing this move toward people demanding ever more personalized, if you like, white glove at scale servicing. And I think that like how one goes about implementing that is really, really interesting. So Alex, maybe you could kick us off in terms of like, do you have any sort of examples of where this is getting used in action?
Yeah, and I actually want to connect something that both Stephen and Alistair somewhat touched on, which is really being able to map the journey. And mapping the journey also includes mapping the steps and understanding what the steps are. And what we do in some of our engagements is we do a lot of ideation, right? In terms of what does the journey need to look like, whether that's the employee journey or whether that's external, right? The people who are actually consuming. Mapping those steps almost ideally, and then finding ways that AI or data will help to enable a better, more smooth or smoother interaction or journey, or how we might look at reinventing the business model itself, right? So through the journey analysis. So that's always an interesting step to go through, especially with the leaders of the company, because often they really don't understand all the way down what's actually going on sometimes, right? So, sometimes things are just done that way because they've always been done that way, and they do need to be challenged. And we're seeing that we can have a real quick impact on productivity that way as well. And so that's actually where everyone is looking at right now. How do I increase productivity using AI? So we're seeing it with the developers. It's almost a given that developers are using some form of pilot, co-pilot, or some form of code assistance in just development. Same thing with no code, right? But when you take a look at where we're seeing it in terms of heavy industry use, the easy one is media and entertainment, right? The recommendation systems have almost always been there. The companies that are able to use those recommenders well are the ones that are capturing the market share today, and even the ones that are disrupting, right? 3 years ago, what was TikTok? Right now, it's a very different conversation for video and media entertainment companies as a whole. And it's very much because they've been able to fine tune a lot of their data versus the user. So it's very, very personalized. So at least here in the States, we'll often have the conversation of the TikTok algorithm knows me better than maybe my spouse does, right? That level of personalization has been reached in some instances. The other one that's really interesting is with drug discovery, right? When we start taking a look at how drugs are being developed in the US, so in the pharmaceutical industry, really being able to do some really massive correlations and actual causation associated with what the impact might be on certain diseases, certain proteins, etc. But where we're actually seeing is also a productivity conversation, because a lot of money is spent um, on creating drugs that aren't going to work, right? And so being able to eliminate, maybe 7 or 8 out of the 10 really quickly allows you to focus on where there might actually be something there. Vision AI is also a really good one, right? That we're seeing. We're seeing it obviously for security. There are always conversations around ethics of using AI in terms of facial recognition, matching, et cetera. The big conversations that we should be having. But when we start taking a look at just high speed anything, right, in manufacturing, right, we're very much seeing vision AI for quality inspection, safety inspection, et cetera, as well. So they're also really there. And then for many communications companies, and this is worldwide, so global conversation on how do you use conversational AI to lower the overall cost associated with call center operations. Also a really big one, right? Eventually you get to a point of diminishing returns because you still need some level of human interaction, which drives to the big conversation of, the fear around AI, which is it going to take my job? Well, the reality is, and when I was at IBM many years ago, Ginny Rometty said something that is still being passed around in the industry, is like, you're not going to be replaced by AI. More likely, you'll be replaced by someone who understands how to use those tools
Someone's
better and
using,
more
yeah.
efficiently,
And
right? So that we'll see.
Yeah. I wonder if any of you guys have experience of AI being used in regulated sectors like financial services, and how that works. Because I know I can see in the question there's specific questions about financial services, but there's also a lot of worry around the legals as well. And I know that the sectors are really sensitive to that. Stephen, do you want to
I can take that. That's okay. So two practical examples of where we've seen that. So first, insurance contact center, customer care environment, where I think the focus was on. I think one of the questions focus was on how do you support the customers better, but also reduce contact demand. And I think that organization had actually made the decision to outsource the delivery to South Africa. So there was also a lot of change going on in that example. So they needed a way that they could support the customer service agents better. So if you imagine they were new, they had everybody in that estate had less than 6 months tenure. So they had to support the customers better, but actually try and reduce the amount of repeat calls. So basically somebody not getting the answer they wanted first time round and having to call back. So I think where the tech's been really good, the AI's been really useful there, is using the power of conversational AI and generative AI to actually real time, whilst the agent's on the call, actually summarize the conversation. So not with a view, because regulated environment, to actually provide any form of financial advice back to the customer, but from an agent perspective, one, advise them on the summary of the conversation, being able to go and interrogate information in the customer account and surface, perhaps underlying issues that helps the agent resolve that issue first time around. I think that's a really hopefully relevant example of where it can work.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think that one of the things that I would take from that, as well as the specific example, is, there's a tendency to think, oh, let's transform an entire process or an entire part of the business and make it all AI. But actually, it's these little advances in the existing interactions that really are where the value is.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, in the UK, you've got something called in financial services called consumer duty legislation, which is a hot topic right now. And the concern from a service point of view is, how are you confident that your agents are identifying financial vulnerabilities across your customers? So if somebody was to say, you're having a conversation to say, I lost my job last month, not everybody would pick up in that straight away to assume that's a financial vulnerability when you're under pressure handling hundreds of calls a day.
Yeah.
That's the type of thing that the tech can help. Yeah,
absolutely. We've sort of started to touch on that on the next question, actually, which is brilliant. I wanted to ask about, as a business leader, we're potentially aware that we need to do something with AI. We need to bring it in. We need to bring those efficiencies that it offers. But it may well come attached to a lot of risk around one's own team and one's own people. Nervousness of, how my job is going to change, how or whether I'm going to be in a job. And I wonder if you've got any advice for people sort of going into that space. Like, I know I've got to do something. How do I manage my clients? How do I manage my team to make sure that I'm, got everybody kind of pointed in the same direction and inspired, if you like, by the potential. Anybody want to jump in? Alistair, you have.
Yeah, I can start with that one. So again, it's about engagement as early as possible. If you haven't started, then do it now. But there needs to be a realization that everybody within an organization needs to start having an opinion on this. I'd reiterate the point that's been made several times that, AI won't replace your job, but somebody who uses AI will. So that's always a good thing to say. It maybe sounds semi-threatening. Maybe a better way of putting it is that if you think about it, there's actually a massive backlog of AI demand in terms of what companies want to do. It's now becoming more accessible, a lot more no code, relatively cheaper to a certain extent. So, AI is no longer the preserve of larger organizations with big budgets. It's coming right down into the SMEs and startups as well. So this is a way of, I think, reassuring people that it's similar to back in the 90s with desktop PCs, or even before that with other sorts of automation. It's like, well, there wasn't mass unemployment after that. I remember the 90s as being really, quite strong in terms of employment. And we sort of see that as probably being the short to medium term. So this is a way of sort of, assuaging people and making sure that they should get on side and they should try and make some engagement with it. So this can be for management, for also for staff as well. So I think that's probably the best way to handle that. And I think economically, I know there's been competing opinions around whether there's going to be mass unemployment or whether it's going to be a big boom. Maybe it'll be a mix in between, or maybe it'll be quite seesaw between different industries. But there are great opportunities. There is a great backlog, and people are wanting to use this technology in a huge way. So even if you have a slight association, a little bit of knowledge with it, then you've probably got a brand new skill that you might be able to ride for years.
Yeah, absolutely. I just realized we're running up to time. I can't believe it. One of the things I think would be really good to sort of start to kind of round off on is, I'm becoming increasingly aware that, the technology that we're talking about touches kind of everything. And if I was starting a business today, I might do it very differently than when we started our business 20 years ago. And sometimes looking at things with a blank sheet of paper is the easiest way of doing it, because sometimes, trying to sort of say, well, where in my business can I make some changes? That's a hard thing to kind of, theorize about. If you were, I'm going to just want everybody to respond to this really. If you were starting, I don't know whatever, but choose a business. I don't know, financial services, automotive, small production, luxury goods. I don't know. If you're starting a business today, what would you do differently in terms of establishing how you operate and how you interact with customers? Do you want to? Who's Alex? You go first.
So one of the things that I do work with a lot of innovators that are trying to figure out, how do I do this now? And we catch them kind of mid-cycle, right? It's like, we're about to launch, but now the funders, or people who are the investors, are beginning to hold back, because it's like, hey, can we use Gen AI to change the way we go to market? And the answer obviously is yes, you could, right? And it is very reachable now. I don't know that it changes fundamentally the things that you do, but very much how you do them, right? And so from, one of the things that both in research and in industry, the conversation is happening about AI and creativity, right? And we're not talking about, hey, just let the AI come up with things for you, because it can do that, right? If you sit down in front of something that is mid-journey powered, et cetera, using that modality, you could get something fairly close to what you want. But being able to sit there and find different words in terms of prompting, et cetera, getting a little bit more abstract, getting emotive, et cetera, that's actually a big thing that we're really only beginning to touch. In fact, many of even my leaders like to say, we're in the first chapter of this really long novel. I was like, no, we haven't gotten out of the preface yet, right?
Yeah.
That's where we are. And so if I was starting, number one, I'd lean in, right? Because as Alistair said, there's really a large talent shortage right now in terms of people that really want to do things, or don't have access to the talent to the people that can. So if I'm sitting down, I'm still mapping things out the way I think I need to be. But then looking at, how do I leverage the systems that are here today and emergent around those modalities to actually enable that.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that we have is, AI almost became a box. And so Gen AI really almost exists outside of that box. So now it's really trying to disrupt the way that we think about it to actually make it more impactful to us, right? So that's the big one. That's the big challenge.
Nice. And Stephen, have you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think in line with the story you told at the start, Jamie, about the health app and your experience and why you liked it. If I was starting a business now, I would look at how I could use the tech to reduce customer effort to the maximum. And I think that would be a good way to scale fast.
Yeah, brilliant. That's good. Nice and concise as well. Thank you. Because coming up to the end. Alistair, I'm going to, rather than asking you the same question, I just want to finish up because we've got like 1 minute. And I think we've answered most of the questions as we've been going, so that's fine. I think there's a couple that we might want to answer on text later on, but that's great. Just to finish off, tell us a little bit about what we've learned today. Just let's summarize what we've learned today. What are the key points that someone who's been kind enough to join us should take away with them?
Yes, I would just say in a sentence, get involved, have conversations around AI, what it means to you, to everybody, not just in your workforce, into society, your neighbours, particularly to elderly relatives as well. Make sure that people are engaged with this technology. We don't want half of society to be sceptical, resentful, etc. And that's going to help the way that you think about it and the way it becomes part of the way you think and the way you operate as well. So communication, I think, is really quite important.
Communication. Stephen?
Yeah, I would echo that. Just put a structure in place that allows you to identify and analyze these opportunities once you've done that.
Yeah. Alex?
Start testing now. That's it.
Nice. Love that. That's what I like. Okay, we've got 1 minute, and I'm just going to take that 1 minute to say thank you so much, guys. Really, really appreciate your time. Really appreciate all of the input. There's loads of great ideas. For me, the one thing to take away is just try it. Like, give it a go. And just remember, it's there. Like you can use it. You can try it. You can be in your car and you can just ask a question. I'm excited to hear everybody's stories. Please follow us at Equator. You can find us on all the social channels. And you can find me on all the social channels as well. And these guys, we'd all, I'm sure I can speak for them, we would all love to answer your questions if you've got more things that you want to ask and things that we didn't get to answer. But this is a very, very exciting space, and one that I'm hoping you all benefit from hugely in the coming days, months, years, before the singularity. Thank you for coming. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.